Tell us your name, your teaching division, and your teachable.
Hi, my name is Andrew Toon. My teachable are Phys Ed and French. What was the other one I have to say?
Teaching division.
Oh, IS, so intermediate senior.
Alyssa Kandata, intermediate senior, visual art and religion.
Hi, I'm Steve. I'm in intermediate senior, and my teachables are business studies and chemistry.
My name is Graham. I'm in intermediate secondary, and my teachables are politics and social science.
My name is Kimberly Gahn, and my teachables are English and history, and I am in the IS division.
My name is Lucas. I'm in the intermediate senior division, and my teachables are geography and French.
So my name is Vivian Kendall Kong. My teaching divisions are intermediate senior, and my teachables are visual art and social science, and I'm planning on upgrading to a third teachable of mathematics.
Name is Daniel Choli. Division is intermediate senior, and teachables would be physical education and science.
Now that we're nearing the end of our first year and you've had some experience in the classroom, how do you feel about your identity being divided between being a student and being a teacher?
I think being a teacher, you're always going to be a student. It doesn't matter whether or not you are certified or not, you're always going to be learning from students or from like other colleagues. I think that delineating just because we're in a degree program at the moment is not wise, because then we're going to forget later on that we are still learning if we don't keep that in mind.
I think my identity has definitely evolved. In the beginning of the school year, I kind of felt more as a student, and even kind of felt a bit nervous in my practicum, because I didn't realize, well, I thought maybe our age wasn't as different as I actually realized it was.
It definitely is, like, for lack of a better word, weird when you're in a classroom, because you're still a student, and like it brings you back into like when I was in high school kind of thing. So I kind of have like almost like a little power struggle.
Once I continued throughout the program, I started feeling a lot more comfortable in front of the students. Once I started forming, that teacher-student relationship, but I also kind of felt I started to be like more of a mentor as well.
So like when I'm not teaching or not running my own lesson, I feel like I'm still a student. But then when I'm running my own lesson, I feel more in the teacher role.
It's a little difficult sometimes because I love learning and I love the pursuit of knowledge, but then I can't necessarily do that all the time because I have to worry about teaching kids and imparting the knowledge that I have, or the knowledge that I'm expected to impart to them.
About your school placement and your community placement?
I really like both of my placements. They're both very different. And I'm tackling different issues at each of them. So some of them I'm tending to the needs of the students at the community practicum. and a lot of them have to do with, you know, needing extra help on things, even just English language learning. So I'm dealing with that there. So it's a really good experience, and I'm learning a lot about different neighborhoods in, you know, a bigger city, and kind of the needs that you have to tend to working in a diverse city like Toronto.
So I've kind of learned a lot of when it comes to community placement, because as a French speaker, I didn't know about the difficulties that French students, like native English students, would be having when speaking French. So it kind of baffles me now, so that I can see their perspective, because we take so many things for granted coming from a French-speaking country. We don't know how you guys, like how native English speakers struggle when they speak French. So by doing this community placement, I have a very good idea of how the dynamics and the struggles that they have now.
I really love my school placement, actually. Like, I'm learning so many things while I'm teaching. Like, I'll go through a lesson in one period, and then I will rework it in the next.
My community placement is in a secret location. It's not listed just because it is a shelter for women who have experienced violence in their families. And so there's like a small group of students, children, but they're all they all have behavioral issues due to trauma and due to life experiences and the fact that they've been uprooted and they're living in a shelter at the moment. So those things are things that I don't think I would typically think of as a teacher. So having the experience of learning from the staff there and learning from the students there, the children there, is just really eye-opening. But also I knew a little bit about it objectively prior to going in, and I wanted to get hands-on experience, so I think it was good.
My community placement, I'm a little more disappointed with it. Kind of the vibe around my community placement, I'm not the biggest, it's not the most welcoming, I find. So that's why I'm a little disappointed with it. As well, certain activities, either are too challenging for certain individuals, so it's not individualized for them. Whereas I'm literally doing most of the work. Whereas on other things, they're way too easy, and they're okay, they're not being challenged, right?
Is there anything that you're learning from your practicum placement that you're not learning in your York classrooms, and vice versa?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff, because the dynamics at school and at university were not the same. University is more kind of theories and concepts. It's more academic, whereas school is more practical. It's more practical. A lot of stuff that we think that we'll be able to implement as theories and concepts, we don't really work the same way when it comes to school. We have different cultures, different priorities, and we have to make sure how we kind of implement what we are learning right now. It's not always easy, because one example is inquiry-based learning, for example. We learn a lot of inquiry-based learning and techniques and stuff, but when you go to school, it's more kind of banking model, particularly in these areas such as Malton and Brampton, where they're not really well off. So you have to, another aspect is that in the department as well, there's a lot of teachers who don't buy this inquiry-based learning stuff. So you are actually coming from York, the only person talking and trying to implement inquiry-based in a situation or in a context where everybody else, they're more into back to basics.
There's only been one class so far in York that I feel has prepared me for the real life experience of teaching. That was my Teachable that we had. We talked about things like unit plans, lesson plans, how to approach the kids, how to teach certain units that they didn't want to do, how to get them up and active so they're actually engaged in their own learning. In terms of other classes, I find it's a lot of theory, and so I've been seeing the theoretical connections from practicum and theory classes, but I haven't really been seeing any usage out of those theoretical connections.
I think in the practicum placement, again, it's called practicum for a reason, but I think it's practical. So you're learning the practical skills. However, I feel like York does a really good job in certain courses to teach you the practical skills. For particularly the subject courses. I feel like that's a really good course in terms of helping you lesson plan, teaching you about IEPs, teaching you about units, teaching you about curriculum documents, all those practical skills that you need to apply in the practicum. So I feel like there's a good balance.
There are some like fundamental things that we learn in class that we can use in our placement, but I believe in our placement it's been more learning on how to use just being with the kids, how to interact with the kids, and even like building that connection with them.
In my community placement, I'm learning more of like how to establish like an inclusive classroom, so like what specific people need, and like it kind of like ends the stigma against people with like autism or.
I feel that the York Education Program did a good job for like inclusiveness for special education and disabled students, but in a physical education class, for example, it's very easy for students to be sidetracked or lose attention towards what the teacher's trying to teach. And I just wish maybe my elective or even other courses got more into detail of how to pay or how to engage the students, that they increase their attention towards what the teacher's trying to say or towards a topic for that certain day.
Well, I think there's definitely a lot of theory that you learn in the classroom at York that you don't necessarily see at your placement. I don't know if there's really anything I see there that I don't see at York. I think York tends to be a lot more theoretical. So, I mean, obviously the practice of whatever you learn here is going to be different from what you think it would be in the classroom.
Do you find that the theory you're learning in your York classes is useful? Why or why not?
I think York did a good job of like introducing me to different kinds of theories, not just exactly one. So example, like a normal authoritative type of teaching pedagogy, or even Paulo Freire's banking model kind of thing. But so I kind of took bits and parts of each theory. I don't think a teacher should abide by one strict theory or like say I'm that kind of teacher. It's more about how to approach a lesson in a different kind of way, because obviously students learn different kinds of ways. So sometimes a banking model could be proper. Meanwhile, another time to be like an inquiry-based learning could be the best to engage your students. So I guess like taking bits and parts of each theory and combining one would probably be the best thing, and I think York has done a good job with that.
Different forms of the theory are useful. Certain types are more useful than others. I'm not as interested in theory as maybe the practical things learned in the classes, but there's definitely something to take from theory, and I think you need to understand the theory in order to be the best teacher you can be. So there's definitely theory that I do find kind of boring at times, but I know at the end of the day it is useful and it is required.
I don't know if this will answer the question, but I find it more theory-based. And like, yeah, some of the theories are applicable to practice. However, some of them are just useless. Like certain courses especially are not, like they feel like they're fillers in the education program rather than useful tools that we could use in a classroom.
Yeah, some of them for sure. I think there's probably a difference between learning about theory and then applying it in your own teaching. So the reflection that we do in a lot of the courses is probably useful, but I think ultimately it's up to the teacher candidates to put that into their own practice wherever they can, if they find it to be valuable.
I find theories useful because I can know the possible outcomes, but in terms of actually dealing with the situation on hand, I'm kind of stuck as a bystander and being like, oh yeah, like I read about that situation in my textbook.
I think it's really important to remember that theory is always applicable. So just as you're doing the theory readings and as you're doing all of the experiencing of like the theoretical concepts and stuff like that, just like as we're reading them thinking, oh, how can I apply this? As opposed to just reading them and being like, this is just theory.
mentor teachers / community leaders do that contradict what you are taught in classes, if there are any?
So lesson plans look very different apparently in our school. Yeah. They're just kind of like, here's a lesson plan. It's not actually following what you're gonna look like, which is fair. Not everyone has time to build it according to like criterion or whatever.
You know, my mentor teacher, like I imagine most mentor teachers, doesn't make a lesson plan ever. I don't think. I don't think most teachers do. I think it's probably something you need to know how to do. But a lot of it, once you've had some experience, kind of just flows naturally from you know, the things you've done before and the planning that you have in your own mind.
A lot of them don't do lesson plans anymore, but I figure that's because they just are like developed teachers and they've been teaching a long time.
Cultural perspective is a different one. They follow the textbook. The textbook is kind of unidirectional. There is no cultural connections for minorities, for racialized black people. And however, this is how we do things out there. We actually follow the textbook. There is no representation of minorities in the curriculum. So from this point of view, we have talked about it. He's basically part of the program which called We Rise Together, which is one of the peer programs when it comes to racialized blacks and performance gap. But in action, there's not so much. So yeah, so it contradicts a lot of what we do here.
Like a lot of our teachers today, or like our profs, are all about like mental awareness and like mental health, mindfulness, whereas like some of the teachers, even like around my mentor teachers, kind of bash that. They probably need to include a little bit more activities, like how we like are taught to chunk it up or differentiate instructions to people. They don't do that as often. Like it's more like a lecture style.
I think sometimes the mentor teacher doesn't take into account the needs maybe of certain students or individual needs. And as teachers in the ORCS program, we do learn that, you know, there's many different needs, there's many different requirements that students have. And a lot of them are in the forms of IEPs, so they're written through that. And I feel like sometimes the teachers don't deliver the programming maybe as much as they should be, in my personal experience. So as a teacher, I definitely want to devote a lot of time, as much as I can anyways, into making sure that every student feels like they are understanding the content being taught and the learning is altered for their benefit.
There is huge contradiction about how to assess for physical education in particular. Like, yes, no, you're not going to base 100% of your grade for that student based on what their physical capabilities are or based on their fitness scores. But with the discussion with my teacher and my own personal view, I think it's the best way to hold your student accountable in the class. Meanwhile, the teacher that taught the elective for my Teachable was heavily against fitness testing, so I guess there's kind of some contradiction there. I think if the intent for the physical education, again, not to just label a student as physically unfit and give them a bad mark, but again, focus on effort and motivation as well.
Also, the way that like lessons are differentiated and stuff like that, I don't see quite as often. But also, art is a very differentiated concept in the first place, so maybe it's just already built in.
How have you been taught to use technology in this program, and how are you actually using it in your classroom placement?
In terms of being taught to use technology, I feel like we've been introduced to a lot of technology, but we haven't really been shown how to use it effectively when it comes to using it in the classroom.
I've learned a lot of techniques when it comes to different softwares what we can use to get more engagement when it comes to students.
Making a YouTube video.
Adobe Spark.
Like slideshows and Google Classroom.
I mean, Google Classroom's a big one, obviously.
Nearpod,
Google Docs, they use that.
How to make comic strips.
the Autodesk Sketchbook.
I never knew how to use Twine.
Google Drives, they use that. Read Scanner.
I've been learning a couple things about multimodality and taking, not just reading based off a textbook, like looking at some slides, playing games like Kahoot.
Kahoot.
Oh, Kahoot exists.
They're so used to being on their phones anyways that having technology like using it with something they already know and something they already like, and I think it's really beneficial towards their learning.
The way that we can incorporate the supercomputers that basically every student has in their pockets is something that I think needs to be fleshed out more in the program. So incorporation of technology in a practical sense would be very helpful. I know that there's a class on new media and like they're trying, but I think some of that might be a little bit too theoretical and not quite as practical on how to use the cell phone as a tool, which has led to this whole Ford thing where we're banning cell phones when we don't even have enough money to supply computers to every class. And they already have a computer in their pocket.
Being able to do those things have been, I guess they're beneficial in the future if I want to try to use them. I don't see them as super helpful right now, but I assume maybe later on they could help me.
A new thing that got brought up in one of my classrooms was the use of Polar systems, so it's like a heart monitor kind of thing. So that technology they use it kind of like in a competitive kind of game, like who can reach their heart rate, monitor the fastest, stuff like that. So the way technology's been used in my classrooms has probably been like inclusive, making the students more inclusive with each other and like promoting like fair competition and such like that.
I don't think York really changed my perspective on that too much. I think you just, you use the tools that you're familiar with and the tools that are available.
There's also this misconception that you've learned how to make an iBook, for example, or to make a video, or to use different software such as Prezi and stuff, that you are the only person doing it in your classroom. So you have to actually show the students how to do it. Mm-hmm. So in one sense, it's all right that you're doing it, you're getting more engagement, and the students are learning a different approach, you know what I mean? But where students or where teachers get it wrong is that they don't send it over to the students and ask them to do it on their own now.
I think that if we keep an open mind to technology as a tool, we can really, really push the boundaries of school.
Anything that you think could be added or changed about the program to better prepare you as an educator?
Well, being more at placement, I think, for our first years, just once a week, it was difficult for me because for me especially because I had a non-semestered school, so I would see my class every other week, but like it'd be better, I think, for us in our first years to have more of like that type of block to go to school, get used to the school, get used to the students, build those connections, because once a week is just, it's nothing. They kind of even forget what my name is. It takes me a while to learn their names.
Yeah, I mean, I would change the first year of the program so that you don't have a single day a week for a year in the classroom. I think it would be good if you could walk in like every other school seems to do it and have a block where you actually get some teaching experience and you get to know the students because you see them more than every 2 weeks.
It's really hard to like build relationships with students when you always see them, actually even mentor teachers, when you see them one time a week rather than if you have like a chunk session, because you don't have a basis or groundwork of what the student is coming off of. It's kind of like you're introducing a new topic every week. Like you go to your classroom and they're on a complete new topic every single week. Even preparing for the class is kind of hard as a TC, because again, you have to constantly monitor with your MT of where he's at, where didn't he get at, like how engaging the students were.
When it comes to practicum, going once a week and when you come back the next week, everything's changed. Everything, you can't prepare ahead, because by the time you get there, they're past that, or or they're not doing it right now. So you come actually unprepared when it comes to practicum. This is a problem I've seen, but I try to prepare ahead, but it's hard. We need more communication when it comes to mentor teachers, schools, and university, so that you know exactly when you're coming, what you'll be doing.
Like foundations needs to be half a year.
I think when it comes to the readings, there is a lot of readings that we could have just trimmed down to the basics, to the most important thing. There is a lot of kind of too much extra stuff, and this kind of deviates you from your objectives when you have to actually pick and choose what's good, what's basically would be useful in the future from what's just fillers. If I had to improve something, I would say more quality than quantity when it comes to the readings.
The assessment course should be mandatory, because I hear that a lot of people are learning things that they can apply to their practice.
No, I would say definitely more practically based experience rather than so much theory. Instead of teaching us that these are the situations that are going to happen, teach us how to deal with those situations.
I would love a good mock interview.
Creating like a teacher portfolio, they could have maybe went through a little more of that detail.
I think this whole program in general needs to be more organized. Oh, it needs to be consistent. If people are taking the same course, it needs to be the same amount of work, the same texts, the same resources, definitely. Doesn't need to be the same prof, but it needs to be at least consistent, whereas you don't have two people, one doing so much work and the other one barely doing any.
I would probably make the program a single year. I don't really think there's much point in being 2 years.
As well, the 2 years would maybe goes back down to 1, but full of courses that are useful and not fillers, and really emphasizes practicums and emphasizes what type of teacher you're going to be and how you're going to what your practice is, what your philosophy is. Really honing in on that, I think, will enhance this program a lot more. Can I talk about me being a concurrent student? So if there was a way that concurrent gets you in from the beginning, but you still do your 4 years, that would be great. Now that I've stopped my undergrad for a year, done teachers college, and then have to go back, it's kind of hard because I'm in a teacher mode. So going back to my undergrad, I find it might be a little bit stressful, and then going back to teaching might kind of have a block. I feel like I'm ready and I want to do more teaching rather than go back and try to finish it up.
I really appreciate the social justice viewpoint of this program. I really appreciate that they're trying to get us to understand the context of the students in a way that often teachers don't, especially from my own experience in schools. It often is forgotten or not really looked into in a way. What I'm taking from this program is I'm really seeing the level of educational privilege that I was afforded in my educational journey, and it's really pushing me to relearn biases, and I'm literally I don't even know how to work with certain populations because I never experienced anything like that in my education. And so I think that if we were to diversify the content even further and give us practical applications, or literally put us in a room where we maybe have a little field trip as a school where we go and we see different things as a class, and we really interact with the students, because I know everyone's community placement is different, but if we really interact with students that have different abilities, we can really see different ways that we can incorporate assistance and differentiation and universal design.
Do you have any overall thoughts on the program?
It's been a really, I enjoyed my experience. The teachers have been engaging, the teachers have been accommodating. I've learned a ton. I was not in this, I didn't know much about the historical context of teaching, and getting introduced to topics like residential schooling. Again, Paulo Freire, it's I felt enhanced my teaching pedagogy, and I would take that for sure into my future teaching career.
I think a lot of students expect to have everything handed to them on a platter. It's a fair critique, but also I think it's important to remember that we need to have repetition to remember things, and we're not going to utilize everything. We just have to remember that sometimes we need to utilize some of it. We can't know what we're going to experience. We won't know until we're there. I think we need to kind of cut them some slack.
When I first got into York, I was extremely excited, and I still have that excitement today. Obviously, there's days that you don't feel like working on schoolwork, and you're tired. One thing I learned about this program, it's tiring. It's a lot of work, and I feel like we can all attest to that. So, minus being tired all the time, it's a really good program, and I would definitely recommend it to anyone interested in teaching that I know.
I heard that if you film yourself, you'll hear yourself say and a lot, and I can already notice myself doing that. Damn it.
Okay, thank you. That's a wrap on this.